Hello, David Perridge here. I'd like to share and discuss with you some simple patterns and processes that can perhaps allow you to become more and more influential with your language, which can make the words you use more effective in influencing people to go the way that you want them to go. When I first heard phrases like that, I kind of sat back. I'm not sure about this, influencing people. Is that something I really want to do? And when I thought about it, it's a realisation that essentially you can't not influence. Every contact you have with somebody, every communication you have, you're influencing them in one way or another. If I simply sit still with my arms folded and attempt not to communicate with you at all, my guess is that you would have made something of me sitting here with my hands clasped, looking in various directions and then maybe looking directly at you. And I don't know what thoughts were going through your mind. Maybe some were complimentary, others perhaps not. I wasn't trying necessarily to influence you, and yet I was communicating, I was having an impact on you, even though I might have been trying not to. You can't not influence. The question is, in which direction do you want to influence people, and for what purpose? And essentially, with what degree of integrity? Now I'm operating on the basis, because I know that it's going to be true, that we're operating with the highest levels of integrity. We're looking to influence people to do things that we want them to do, because those are things that, as far as we can tell, are also in their best interests. Whether that's working in a business context, or certainly where I do, and perhaps where you do, working in a school, looking to support and influence perhaps students to engage in learning, students to see that they are actually capable of far more than perhaps they give themselves credit for at any particular time, raising their levels of expectation of themselves, maybe supporting colleagues in raising their expectations of students, maybe supporting myself or colleagues in getting on with tasks that need to be done but perhaps have just been left for too long. Only to influence. So influence is a good thing, and it's something that we can't avoid. So the question is, how can we do it more effectively, more efficiently, so that we and those we serve can have more and more success? Well, there are many ways to do that, and all I want to look at in this section are a small number of helpful ideas and hints that perhaps will be useful. Now, I guess these are going to be things that you may well have come across before. Then if so, you may well be using them on a consistent basis already. And perhaps this could just be the start of a process whereby you're using the ones you're aware of more and more consistently and more effectively. And you may choose to pick up one or two of the other ideas I'm going to put forward and give them a go, consistently, seeing how much they improve your ability to influence and guide people towards the goals that you have for them and that they set for themselves. The first thing that strikes me that's really, really important is to set an outcome, to have a clear idea of where it is that you want to go. That could be simply, if you're dealing with a sad or distressed person, it's just to get them to calm. That could be the outcome. Not looking for a life-changing goal, but simply to get them more settled. Or it could be to get them to re-engage in a process. Getting a child who's at the moment not engaging in learning, not prepared to sit and settle at their work. The goal, the outcome, could be to get them settled back to a piece of work. Whatever the outcome is, it's important to have it clear in your mind. Because once that's set, your language automatically directs towards that outcome, and you become more and more likely to achieve the outcome that you've set. Now, very often I find that when I'm communicating with somebody in any particular set of circumstances, there might initially be some kind of resistance. They don't want to do what I might be asking them to do. They might not think they're capable of what I say they're capable of, and there's a sense of resistance. There's been some research done by a man called Dr. Eric Knowles, and he investigated this and found that a really, really important thing to do is to acknowledge that resistance, to recognise that it's there, even simply to say, okay, I accept that at the moment this is something that you don't think you can do yet. hear that you're angry with this person. I accept that you think they've done something to upset you that's wrong. I'm not necessarily agreeing with them on either occasion, but what I'm doing is saying that their response is for them real, and in that sense it's valid. And I acknowledge that, and by doing that, Eric Knowles' research suggested that you reduce that resistance by roughly 29%. Immediately, that person is moving towards you, you're moving towards them, you're in a better position to influence. The second word that you might want to use fairly frequently is simply the word because. No. How can that have an impact? Well, because human beings are meaning-making machines. We look for reasons for something, and if you give us a plausible reason, more often than not, we'll go with you. Now, the research that backs this up was conducted Dr. Ellen Langer, I'm not sure it's doctor, but Ellen Langer in 1976 did some research for the Xerox photocopying company, and she was looking at people's willingness to allow people to move into queues. Well, that was the basis of the research anyway, that was the example. And she started by going into photocopying queues, testing them out, saying, can I go in front of you please? And she found that 60% of the time people allowed her in front. Then she varied it. She went and found other queues, and she asked if she could go in front, saying, please can I go in front of you because I'm in a rush to get this photocopying done. And she found that 94% of the time she was allowed in front, to the front of the queue to do the photocopying. That's fine, she said, because I guess that I've given a really valid reason. So if I give a really valid reason, that's why it works. Now, she decided to vary it one more time, and she found some more queues to get in front of, and she went into the queues and she said, please can I go in front of you because I've got some photocopying to do. And she found that 93% of the time she was allowed in front. Just 1% difference, and all she'd said was, can I go in front of you because I've got some photocopying to do. The same reason that everybody else is there. Just simply using that word because, as long as it's plausible in that context, increases massively your chance of getting someone to comply and to go in the direction that you want them to go in. Worth a try. And alongside that, the use of things that are known in NLP circles as tag questions. There are questions that go on the end of statements. And I guess that you've learned many things before, haven't you? So although this may be new to you, it is something that you could pick up fairly quickly, couldn't you? The use of tag questions at the end of statements. Because tag questions are really quite easy to learn, and they're quite easy to understand, aren't they? And in fact, you may find that you're already finishing off my sentences before I get there, aren't you? And yet, simply those two words, that little tag question at the end of a statement, makes it very hard to disagree with. The person goes with you. As long as what you're saying is plausible, they follow, and they carry on with you. So, maybe in a learning situation, I might say to somebody, if they're struggling, I recognise, I accept that you're finding this difficult at the moment. Yeah, I see that, I get that. Now, because you've learned many things before, haven't you? That means that you're able to learn new things, aren't you? I recognise that at the moment you're finding this challenging, and yet if you think about some of the things that in the past you found difficult, and that you managed to succeed in achieving, you can begin to see, can't you, that it's possible, as we calm down and slow down, that we can work our way through this, can't we? One more thing to try, one more thing to put in place, are words that suggest a sense of possibility. In NLP terms, they're called modal operators of possibility. I don't think you need to worry about that. So I know some people like the language, so I'll just introduce you to it. But essentially they're words that suggest or create a sense of possibility, like may, can, could. And if you put all those together and you use them, and the more you practice, the more fluent you become, you find you start to create an atmosphere between you and the other person where you're becoming more and more influential in directing them towards where you want to go. So, it could be, maybe my student is Sally. Sally, yeah, I can see, I get the sense that you're finding this really very challenging, and that it's something that at the moment you don't think you can do, can you? No. And yet, Sally, I know that in the past there are many things that you've achieved, many things that you probably thought before were very, very difficult. And you thought perhaps at that time you couldn't do those. And yet you can now, can't you? So as you think of those, recognising that you've done those and you succeeded in them. Because of that, because of the fact you've overcome difficulties in the past, it's possible that we can sit down now, can't we, and start to break down this particular piece of work. We can start to look at it in smaller pieces. Because when we break things down into smaller pieces, often they become a bit easier, don't they? The problem doesn't seem so big when you break it down. And because you know that, that means we can sit down now and we can go and have a go at this. Because as we do, you might just begin to recognise that you can learn new things. Because you have already, haven't you? And if you could do it before, then you can do it again, can't you? That's right. So, my suggestion to you is that you take those suggestions that I've made, that you acknowledge resistance, that you use terms such as because, that you use terms such as tag questions, that also you listen very carefully and you look very carefully for the particular words that the person uses, because their words are significant, their words are important to them. And if they use a certain word 2 or 3 times, use that in your answer, use that in your questions, use that in your statements. Not again and again and again, but use it once or twice. So, if my young lady Sally said that relaxed was how she learns best, then I would find a way, as I'm talking to her, saying, Sally, we've recognised that you find this difficult. We've also recognised that you've succeeded in the past. And you've told me that as you think about that, knowing that you've succeeded many times in the past, and because you've succeeded many times in the past, you're able just to relax a little bit now, aren't you? No, as you relax and slow things down, things get a bit clearer, don't they? That's right. And that means that we can just go on now to start breaking the problem down even further. Just relax and we can start to see a way through it. Because you've done lots of these sorts of things before, haven't you? So use their language. Use their gestures. Not over the top, but just in moderation. You build that connection and you're more and more able to influence in the direction you want to go. So, take these ideas. Pick the 2 or 3 that stand out to you the most. Practice. Play. And notice what you notice. You might notice just how more and more successful you're becoming in influencing people. Have the outcome. Use the language. Play and enjoy.